2015 Cleveland Cavaliers looked like a legitimate championship team. LeBron James was back in Cleveland, Kyrie Irving was emerging into a superstardom, and Kevin Love had finally joined forces with them to form the NBA's newest super team. But in the very first round of the playoffs, disaster struck. During Game 4 against the Boston Celtics, Kevin Love suffered one of the most painful and impactful injuries of that postseason. A shoulder dislocation that ended his playoffs instantly and dramatically changed Cleveland's championship hopes. So this injury did happen late in the first quarter of Game 4 between the Cleveland and Boston. Kevin Love and Boston Celtics center Kelly Olynyk got tangled up right here while fighting for a loose ball. Olynyk hooked Love's left arm and aggressively pulled it downward while Love's arm was extended away from his body. That pulling force created a violent traction injury to the shoulder joint. Within seconds, Love immediately grabbed his left shoulder in pain and ran off the court. He would never play again during the 2015 playoffs. So if we slow down exactly when the injury did happen to Kevin Love's left shoulder, we see the position of Kevin Love's shoulder here. If we take a look at that left shoulder, we see that it's an abduction, so that's when that shoulder is lifted away from the body. That's also, you can see that there is some external rotation with his back of his wrist. If you see in Kelly Olynyk's arm, back of that wrist is pointing backwards here. And then Kelly's force that he is providing, he's providing a force that's going towards the back as well as down, which is going to pull a lot of tension through that shoulder joint, specifically in this anterior portion right here. The result is an anterior shoulder dislocation. That means the top of the humerus, the upper arm bone, was forced out of the socket toward the front of the body. This is by far one of the most common type of shoulder dislocation in athletes. So to understand why this injury is so serious, you need to understand how the shoulder works. So the shoulder is called the glenohumeral joint. It's essentially a golf ball sitting on a tee. So the golf ball is this humeral head seen here, and this is a part of the humerus of the shoulder. So, and then the T we have is this glenoid socket, which is on the scapula seen right here. So the socket is extremely shallow. So that is important because this shoulder is incredibly mobile because of this, but also makes it very unstable. Add a few of the stability factors in right here. Obviously, the labrum does provide some stability, but also we have ligaments. So we have here our superior glenohumeral ligament, our middle glenohumeral ligament, and then our inferior glenohumeral ligament. Along we have our capsule that also helps provide that stability of the shoulder joint. We also have muscles of this shoulder joint that help with stabilization. We also have our rotator cuff muscles. Right here we have our supraspinatus, our infraspinatus, our teres minor, and then more anteriorly we do have our subscapularis seen right here. So when Kevin Love did have his shoulder injured, these structures definitely can tear. So that is big because in Kevin Love's case, the injury reportedly caused significant damage to that labrum, as we saw earlier, as well as the surrounding stabilizing tissues. So the labrum is a ring of cartilage that deepens the shoulder socket and helps stabilize the joint. When the humerus pops out of place, the labrum can tear off the bone. That injury is commonly called a Bankart lesion. A torn labrum creates pain, instability, weakness, and a much higher risk for future dislocations. And for NBA players who constantly rebound, absorb contact, extend overhead, and fight through physical play, the instability becomes a major problem. So immediately after a shoulder dislocation, the first priority is reducing the joint. So that means physically putting the shoulder back into place, and sometimes it relocates spontaneously. Other times, though, medical staff must manipulate the arm carefully to guide the humeral head back into the socket. So after reduction, the shoulder is immobilized in a sling, swelling and inflammation are controlled, and imaging is performed to assess structural damage. MRI scans later revealed that Kevin Love's injury was severe enough to require surgery. And why was the surgery so necessary? Kevin Love underwent surgery shortly after the injury to repair the damaged labrum and stabilize the shoulder. So for high-level athletes, surgery is often recommended when there is a major labral tearing, instability persists, or the risk of dislocation is extremely high. Especially in younger or athletic patients, non-operative treatment can carry a very high recurrence rate, so that procedure likely involved reattaching that torn labrum, tightening the capsule, and restoring stability in the front of the shoulder. So a typical recovery timeline for shoulder stabilization surgery is long and frustrating. So typical rehab progression looks like this. So the first 4 to 6 weeks, it's an immobilization phase, so using the sling, protecting the repair, and limited shoulder movement. Then you have week 6 to 12, which is focused on more range of motion, so gradually restoring the mobility. And then you have months 3 to 5, which is when they're going to focus on strengthening, so rebuilding those rotator cuff muscles that we did talk about earlier. And then phase 4 is that return to sport, which is usually around 5 to 6 months minimum for basketball athletes. Players must regain strength, confidence, stability, and contact tolerance. Kevin Love eventually returned to start of the next NBA season. This was definitely a championship run altered. The injury completely changed the Cleveland's playoff rotation. Kevin Love was averaging scoring, rebounding, floor spacing, and elite outlet passing. Without him, the Cavaliers lost their stretch 4 matchup nightmare, their offensive spacing, and a major secondary scorer. LeBron James had to shoulder an enormous workload, and things got even worse later in the playoffs when Kyrie Irving suffered a fractured kneecap in Game 1 of the NBA Finals against the Golden State Warriors. Suddenly, LeBron was carrying the depleted Cavaliers roster almost entirely by himself against one of the deepest teams in basketball, and despite that, Cleveland still pushed the series to 6 games, so many NBA fans still wonder what happens if Kevin Love stays healthy. Could the Cavaliers have won the 2015 NBA championship? It definitely remains one of the biggest playoff what-ifs of the decade. So with Kevin Love's 2015 shoulder dislocation, it is a perfect example of how one moment can reshape an entire postseason. A single traction force on a rebound battle caused a shoulder dislocation, major labral damage, as well as season-ending surgery, and a ripple effect that changed the NBA Finals. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know if you have any questions or comments down below, and thank you so much for watching.